Sometimes you just go into a show with so little expectation, such as a WWE Stomping Grounds, a pay-per-view that, let's be honest, beforehand didn't really seem like it was needed at all. I mean, you could argue it wasn't needed at all afterhand, too, but overall, I can't complain with what we were given on this show. The first probably 3/4 of this show was excellent to great. And there were some things that weren't as good as others, but it was really the last 3 matches that really brought it down from what it could have been. But the early going and into the middle of the show was just absolutely excellent. And it just, sometimes you forget that despite other incompetent areas of WWE, they still do, to this day, have the most talents on the most talented roster in professional wrestling. And, there's All Elite Wrestling coming in, and there's New Japan and all that, but I still believe that to this day, whether they're given the chance to show it or not is a whole different story. But this is still the best professional wrestling roster there is on the planet. And they were given the chance to show that today. There was a lot of good stuff on this show, a lot of surprising stuff, I would say. But this is your Enhancement Talent Extra review for WWE Stomping Grounds. It is time to kick ass and take names. Don't forget. And also don't forget to check out everything in the links in the description. You can check out the full podcast that we do normally every Thursday night. I'm going to try to start uploading more to the YouTube channel for extra content on hopefully pay-per-views, Raw and SmackDown, but we'll see how that goes. I'm doing that sort of on a trial basis. And also, there's an email in the description. It's Mr. Blitz with 2 I's and 2 Z's at gmail.com. You can email me there with any feedback you have for the show. Tell us what you like, we'll do more of it. Tell us what you don't like, we'll do less of it. And that is how we get better. And anything else you want to add in, anything you want us to cover here, or just to let me know that you exist, or something like that. And you can also leave a like and comment and do all that YouTube stuff on this video. But we're going to get into the full review of WWE Stomping Grounds. Time to kick ass and take names. The pre-show, there was only one match on the pre-show. Even though it was an hour-long pre-show, there was only one match. It was the Cruiserweight match. I was only half paying attention to this because I was making a sandwich. It was a good sandwich. Salami, ham, roast beef, Gouda, Colby Jack. Put it in the air fryer. Got it toasted up. I even put some kettle corn potato chips on it to add a little extra crunch. Good stuff. Good stuff. But from what I was half paying attention to, this match was hard-hitting and typical cruiserweight action. The crowd seemed to be more into it as the match went on, as we know that nobody watches 205 Live, so it's hard to be invested in this stuff. But Drew Gulak ended up gaining the Cruiserweight Championship off of Tony Nese. Nese won the title at WrestleMania against Buddy Murphy, and this was the end of his reign. So we'll see what they do with Drew Gulak going forward. Unfortunately, no more Buddy Murphy on this 205 Live roster. He's too busy eating catering on SmackDown Live. And we get into the main show, which ended up starting off with Becky Lynch versus Lacey Evans for the Raw Women's title. Was a bit surprised by this. In our predictions we did on Thursday, I picked Joe versus Ricochet to start this show. Interesting choice to go with Becky and Lacey, but can't argue with it. Becky is still one of the more over baby faces in WWE today, even though she's been cooled off a lot since last year. But nonetheless, not a bad way to start. This match, it wasn't bad. For what it was, I would say it was a fine match. Some things I noted was that Becky's spot calling, they need to either turn the mics in the ring down, or she needs to learn how to speak more quietly when she's calling spots. But then again, if I was in there with Lacey Evans, I would probably want to be very sure that she knows what we're doing. So, Becky goes on a flurry early. Lacey ends up grounding her, going after Becky's her ribs. Not her, Jesus Christ, never mind. So later on, another thing I noted was that Michael Cole doesn't know what Becky Lynch's finisher is, the disarmer, because she clearly had Lacey in a regular armbar, but Cole insisted on screaming, "The disarmer! The disarmer!" Corey had to cover him up after that and inform everyone that it was just an armbar. Later spot in this match was that Lacey wipes her armpit like she does with the little towel thing, like the last time she wiped her armpit and then wiped her face, which was kind of stupid. But this time she wipes her armpit and throws it at Becky. The ultimate disrespectful heel thing to do. So Becky picks this up and ends up shoving it in Lacey's mouth. That was fascinating, I guess. The finish comes with Lacey going up top. She ends up being pulled off the turnbuckle into a disarmer, and she once again quickly taps out Lacey. As soon as Becky gets that disarmer like halfway in, Lacey is already tapping out. This was fine for what it was, but I really thought I really think that Lacey isn't at the level yet where she should be challenging Becky Lynch, especially for the second time in a row, coming off the Money in the Bank match. Just really not her time, it doesn't feel like, but there's such a lack of depth on the women's rosters on both shows, really. Even though there's plenty of talent, they lack a lot of credibility, so they tried to make something new with Lacey Evans. I would say it hasn't really worked, but who am I to say? I'm also not sure. I thought this program would have been better if, instead of this being the rematch, they could have just made this the first match. Because if you watch any of the video packages going into this match, the match with Becky and Lacey at Money in the Bank isn't really the focal point. It's the focal point was that Lacey costs Becky her match against Charlotte. So I'm not sure why you couldn't just have Lacey do that, cost her the match against Charlotte, and then have this be their first match. At least then Lacey only has to take one loss instead of two. But, that's the typical WWE way of doing things, is to elongate feuds as long as they can. And by the end of this show, it might be elongated even longer. I did note after this that as soon as this match opened the show and Lacey lost, I just got the weird feeling that it's definitely going to be Lacey that ends up being the referee for the Baron Corbin match. But we will get into that later. Up next, we have Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn going against Big E and Xavier Woods. Both me and Chris agreed on our predictions that we'd have Owens and Zayn going over, because the last week, Monday and Tuesday, it was something I harped on Thursday's podcast, is that Owens and Zayn were just made to look like absolute goofs on both Raw and SmackDown. I think in both shows they were in 2 out of 3 Falls matches, and got swept. Now, in the first one, they turned on Baron Corbin, and he got the second fall. But nonetheless, Sami Zayn was pinned twice in the last week. And on SmackDown, they were both pinned in a 2-0 sweep against Kingston and Rollins, I think. So, knowing that and knowing WWE's booking philosophies, you know that when one team has momentum, it makes all of the sense in the world to halt that and give the other team their win back, and that's what they did here. But this was a really fun match. This match starts right away like it was out of the WWE 2K19 video game. Owens knocks down Big E off the apron. He hits 3 super kicks on Xavier Woods, and then Owens and Zayn just continue hitting big moves on Xavier Woods for like the first 3 minutes of this match. It was like a swanton bomb from Owens, a big move, Blue Thunder Bomb by Zayn, a frog splash by Owens, just big move after big move. And then after that, Zayn and Owens worked over Woods for the whole first portion of this match until he eventually gets the hot tag to Big E. Big E runs wild for a bit, and they get the great near fall later as Sami Zayn hits a haluva kick on Woods and throws him into a pop-up powerbomb from Owens, but Big E would break up the pin. Big E ends up giving Zayn the spear from the apron to the floor, which scares me every time that Big E runs with Zayn on the apron. He runs in the ring and spears him from the apron to the floor. It's such a hard move to do because that rope, that middle rope, it's just hard, and the apron, it's hard to get enough distance to clear the whole thing and have a safe landing. So that's it seems like he only pulls it out for the big move, the big matches now, but that spot always just scares me. Then both guys are taken out, Owens and Zayn. Woods goes for a top rope move, but Owens knocks him down, and he hits the Stone Cold Stunner for the win. Really fun match. Hope they build Zayn and Owens up as a tag team going forward. With the lack of depth in the tag team division, Raw and SmackDown, you could really use Owens and Zayn to just be built up as credible threats for. I know both of the tag champs right now are both heel teams, so it might be difficult for Owens and Zayn to maneuver into a feud there unless they drop the titles to a babyface team that they can transition them onto. But that's no reason for them not to build up some credibility in the tag team division in the meantime. They've been treated not good since Zayn and Owens have both came back. Owens, obviously, he had his matches for the world title, but it was Kofi's time, and it was unfortunate timing for Owens because it probably might have been him in a match for the title at WrestleMania, but just poor timing because Kofi got over the way that he did. Obviously, that's a great thing. It all happens for a reason, but it sucks for Owens because if they'd have known that would happen, maybe they could have held off on Owens' return for a bit longer until they had better plans for him. But hopefully we get a bigger Zayn and Owens push going forward into some credibility in the tag division. Treat them as a real tag team. They're not doing anything as singles guys right now. Owens used to be a Universal Champion. He used to be one of the upper guys, but it's just not there right now, and I would rather see them built up as a legitimate tag team at this point. And, to this point, the first 3 matches of the show all really held up. The Lacey and Becky match wasn't great, but it was fine. And this tag match was really good, and that leads us to Samoa Joe versus Ricochet for the United States title. This one was one of the more surprising moments of the night, and I really enjoyed that they did what they did here. Early on, man, Ricochet is just bumping around like a madman for Samoa Joe. Like every bump he's taking is on his head and neck. It's all high up. He's just flying around the ring and just taking all these mad bumps for Samoa Joe. And they just beat the hell out of each other this match. There was no punches held, and they just really made this a hard hitting match. And it was fun to watch. Although I do cringe for Ricochet when I see him doing those high bumps and those really just higher neck bumps, just because those don't last forever. So, and especially with all the high flying stuff Ricochet does, the 630 and all the dives he does. I mean, it's fun to watch, but it all catches up eventually. Ricochet fought from underneath for almost all of this match until towards the end, but eventually he was able to fight out, and through a lot of high-flying moves, some dives, and all that, Ricochet eventually would be able to hit the 630 and get the win over Samoa Joe, and he wins his first title in the main roster, winning the United States title. And I did not expect that at all. I expected Samoa Joe to retain here. I've thought to this point Ricochet was just positioned to be another guy on the main roster. They did a great job giving him a big win here. And there was, it sucks for Joe because his title reign really wasn't what it could have been. But Joe, I just don't think there's a lot of mileage in him going forward at this point. They've done a lot of damage to him in the past, and the great thing was that Ricochet was just able to beat him clean. There was no controversy involved like there was with the Rey Mysterio match for Joe or anything like that. It was just a clean win, and that's it's a good win for Ricochet going forward and building to his future United States title reign. He goes to the back and is celebrated by some of the baby faces in the back, including Charlotte for some reason was there. She wasn't even on the show, but she was there for some reason. And Triple H comes up and hugs him and gives him some words, and that was cool to see. They don't normally do that on the main shows where Triple H congratulates one of his NXT guys. So that was cool to see. After that, we had Heavy Machinery versus Daniel Bryan and Eric Rowan for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. The crowd was on fire for Daniel Bryan. This was in Tacoma, Washington. I believe Daniel Bryan's from Seattle or around there. Obviously, Bryan, the mega heel everywhere else, but here in the state of Washington, all bets are off. And there were chants of "Please recycle," "Drive a Prius." It was either "Please recycle" or "We recycle." I'm not sure exactly what they were saying, but either way, a chant about recycling. That's wholesome right there. How can Daniel Bryan be the bad guy? This was another solid match on this card. Otis is someone, and Tucker, if Heavy Machinery are a team that I just find fun to watch. Otis is just completely over the top nonsense, and Tucker has really been like the lower end of this team until this match. I thought Tucker did a fantastic job. All sorts of dives, and I think he even pulled out a moonsault in this match, and just all sorts of cool stuff from Tucker. I thought he was good in this match. Towards the end, Otis and Rowan get the tags in, and it's like a big man stare off. It was like it looked like it was like the double hot tag sort of thing, and then both guys are going to go after each other, but then both of them just slowly get in the ring. They stare each other down. They do some back and forth shoulder tackles to each other that doesn't knock either of them down, all the big man stuff. But eventually, when Rowan is going off the ropes for a shoulder tackle, Bryan gets the blind tag on Rowan. And then after that, Otis picks Rowan out of the air, gets the tag into Tucker, and they go for the compactor. But Bryan pulls the top rope down, forcing Tucker to fall out of the ring. Bryan goes to the top rope and hits a diving knee to Otis. Bryan goes for a dive on Tucker, but he cuts him off with a forearm at the apron. Tucker does a dive off the top rope to Rowan to take him out, gets back in the ring, and that distraction allows Bryan to roll him up with the small package and get the win for Bryan and Rowan, retaining the tag team titles. Good showing from Heavy Machinery. I thought it was too early for them to win this championship match, but it really just depends on what they do with them going forward, because I would hate for this to just be their one-off chance and now they get lost in the shuffle like it so often does. It seems like the only storyline sometimes takes place that revolves around the titles, especially in the tag team division, because it just seems like SmackDown is only a 2-hour show, and they have the freaking wild card rule taking up time that could be used to develop some of these other guys. So hopefully Tucker and Otis gets at least some TV time going forward. Maybe they'll continue with Bryan and Rowan going forward, and they'll have some more matches with them. Up next, we had Alexa Bliss versus Bayley. By the way, I watched the Alexa Bliss 365 that came on right after the show. It was really good. I would definitely recommend watching it. The network always has those sort of good documentary style stuff. They had the Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch. I don't know if it was the 365 or what it was. I think they were 24s, is their series, but the 365, it just documented Alexa's whole time from last year's WrestleMania to this year's WrestleMania, and all of the concussions and injuries in between. And it was a good watch if you have time for that. But this match with Alexa versus Bayley for the SmackDown Women's title, this was a match that Bayley desperately needed to win, being the SmackDown Women's Champion after her cash-in at Money in the Bank. It comes full circle after TLC 2017, when Alexa Bliss beats Bayley for the Raw Women's Championship in the kendo stick on a pole match. The whole storyline going into that was will Bayley be able to get extreme? And Alexa just absolutely destroyed her in that match. And the memorable part of it, and what damaged Bayley so much, was the This Is Your Life segment they did on the Go Home Raw to that Extreme Rules. Did I call it TLC? It was the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. But nonetheless, that This Is Your Life segment, I was there live in, I don't remember if it was Greensboro or I think it was Greenville, South Carolina for that show. And that segment, it will always go down in history as one of the worst Raw segments in history. And I was there live for it, so, I guess that's cool. But it comes full circle with this match. Bayley, later on in the match, goes for a dive on Alexa, but Alexa kind of pushes Nikki in the way and gets out of the way herself. The distraction allows Bliss to take over, gets Bayley in the ring for the Twisted Bliss, but Nikki Cross enters the ring, trying to go after Bayley, I guess, and the referee stops her. The distraction allows Bayley to get her knees up when Alexa does go for the Twisted Bliss, and she would deliver a Bayley to belly for the win. Preferably I'd just like Bayley to just win clean, but they're continuing this angle with Nikki Cross, which makes no sense to me. Why Nikki Cross has all of a sudden turned a 180 on what her character was in NXT and the few times she was on the main roster. But Alexa continues to manipulate Nikki Cross, and I guess this will probably further that. I feel like I don't know if maybe you transition into Nikki Cross versus Bayley at this point, but who knows? I'm not sure what the payoff really is for this whole storyline, so we'll see. After this, and to this point, every match on the card was good to really good, and the Bliss and Bayley match, it was fine. I wouldn't go much further than that. The Becky and Lacey match was good, but not great, and there were some issues in that match. But other than that, every match on the show was pretty good. And then we get to Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. And I believe this is the third to last match on this show. And this is where things, to me, just started to take a cliff dive from the rest of the show, where if they would have just ended it before this, I would have been fine. But the show had to go on, and we had Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre. Shane McMahon making his presence felt in this match, his best in the world presence. And we all know how great that always is. So Reigns early on in this match, and they started early when McIntyre got to Reigns before Reigns even made his entrance, and they brawled a bit, and the bell rang, and Reigns ends up going for his the Superman dive he does over the ropes, where normally he'll do it onto like a crowd of people. And in this case, there was only Drew and Shane there. And Shane got the hell out of there. He knew what was good for him. He wasn't trying to catch Roman at all. But somehow Roman overshot Drew and almost completely crashed and burned. But Drew was able to catch him a little bit to soften his fall. But it can be taken for granted how great of an athlete Roman Reigns is, because I don't know how the hell he jumped that far over the top rope and still almost overshot Drew, who was standing a good bit away from there, but he still somehow almost managed to overshoot him. But thankfully, everything seemed to go okay there. And Roman then goes into dumb babyface mode as he chases Shane around ringside and into the crowd like an idiot. And that allows Drew to recover and cut off Roman, who's trying to chase Shane, and that would let him take control for the middle portion of the match until later. Roman would end up hitting a spear, but Shane pulls the ref out of the ring before 3. At least he was supposed to, but he kind of got there late, and Drew was forced to kick out because Shane just got there late, and he still pulls the referee out. He pulls him to the floor, and somehow this knocked that referee out for a good 3 minutes, just falling from the apron to the floor. These referees are like that SpongeBob episode. They were born with glass bones and paper skin. So while this referee is down, Shane goes in. He hits a coast-to-coast on Roman. Or Chris would, if Chris were here, he'd make fun of Shane for not being able to make it coast-to-coast anymore. But that's exactly what happened. He almost went coast-to-coast. And Roman had to lean into him to get the full effect. Shane then goes out and throws the ref back in. Drew gets the cover, but Roman kicks out at 2. Drew tries to finish Roman off with a Claymore, but Roman evades it. Shane just runs into the ring, and Roman throws him over the top rope. Roman hits a spear for the win, and Drew McIntyre is an absolute geek in this match. This man had the help of Shane McMahon. Roman was distracted by Shane McMahon for half of this match. He ran around the freaking ring in the crowd after this man. And Drew McIntyre still was not able to beat him. Shane McMahon pulled the referee out of the ring and beat down Roman Reigns himself. And Drew McIntyre still could not win this match. Absolute loser they have made Drew McIntyre to be. And this was just a shame. Because the Super Showdown match, Drew McIntyre helps Shane, and Shane wins. But in this match, Shane helps Drew even more than Drew helped Shane in the last match, but Drew still couldn't win. And you combine that with just the history of McIntyre. We talked about this on Thursday. Just his whole history is, since he's come back, has just to be someone else's lackey or their heavy or their bodyguard or whatever you want to call it. Between the Dolph Ziggler, who he debuted with, just being his backup, and now with Shane, and even before that with Braun Strowman and Baron Corbin. It's just a shame because Drew, I mean, a lot of people say that he can be boring and there's nothing too special about him after the bell rings, but there's still, I still feel like there's more you can do with him than this. He's a very talented guy, and it's just a shame to see him pulled into this Roman Reigns and Shane McMahon vortex where he's the third wheel in that storyline. And that's all he is. And that's a shame. After this, we had Kofi Kingston versus Dolph Ziggler, steel cage match for the WWE Championship match. For the WWE Championship, rather. This comes off the back of their Super Showdown match, where for some reason WWE doesn't want to push the talents that they already aren't using, so they went to old reliable. You need someone to take a pin? Call up Dolph Ziggler. That should be like his tagline. You need someone to take a pin? Call me. And in this case, they needed him to. Well, I guess he didn't take a pin in this match, but nonetheless. Coming off the Super Showdown match where Kofi Kingston cheated to beat Dolph Ziggler, with Xavier Woods kicking Dolph Ziggler into a trouble of paradise. Total heel move by Kingston. And then we get the second match, which is a steel cage match, which was so that Ziggler could have it just be a one-on-one match and not have the New Day involved at all. This shit is so backwards. Kofi is the babyface. He cheats to win, so then Ziggler gets a cage match against him to block out the outside interference. What sense does that make? But nonetheless, this match was painfully boring. And I actually looked on the Wikipedia page for Stomping Grounds, and this was the longest match on the show. Went 20 minutes exactly. And this was just... I don't really like cage matches for like WWE title matches on pay-per-view. Like, it's fine for a TV main event or for a lower card pay-per-view match, but it just feels like with a WWE Championship match in a steel cage, there's only so much you can do in a steel cage match, right? I mean, and that's what this was. It was every steel cage match we've ever seen, and like, I can hardly tell you anything that happened up until the finish. It was just boring. There was nothing to it. The finish, though, was something that I haven't seen before. So I'll at least give them that much, that they came up with an innovative finish. That comes where Dolph super kicks Kofi. He crawls to the door, But Kofi gets up, and as Ziggler has his hands out the door, but you need 2 feet hitting the ground to officially exit the cage and win the match. So with Dolph underneath the bottom rope and reaching and pulling himself to the outside, Kofi runs and he dives over the second rope over Dolph Ziggler and just splats to the floor for the win. And he retains the WWE Championship, and I'm going to assume that's the last of Ziggler on WWE TV for a while. They'll probably go back to doing his comedy tours and all that, but just unneeded. Like Kofi needs to face someone else because, and there's so many more guys that we could put in that main event spots, and obviously there were some issues like Daniel Bryan was injured, and Kevin Owens didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, so that took away 2 challengers that they probably would have done in a program with Kingston. But Dolph just wasn't the guy to go with, in my opinion. I'd like to see them either elevate someone to that point and have a legitimate challenger, or at least just give us something more credible, something you can do a better story with. Like Randy Orton, I think, as Kofi's next challenger would be a fine call. We have Aleister Black, who's in the back wanting someone to open his door for the last 2 months. There's Buddy Murphy, who I think I saw his face on a milk carton last week. We still haven't seen him debut on SmackDown. And I'm sure there's many more that could be used in elevation to give Kofi something more interesting to do. Because they've done a good job of protecting Kofi and making him look like a strong champion. It's just that the challenge, the chase, hasn't really been there. And that can sometimes be the challenge of a babyface champion, is that, once you get the chase is what you sell. You sell the chase to the championship, but once the babyface conquers it all and he finally gets there, it's hard to keep the same momentum going. We saw that with Daniel Bryan when he finally captured the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 30. He ended up getting injured and had to relinquish his title, but if you remember, his next program after that was with Kane. And nothing against Kane, but he wasn't the guy that Daniel Bryan needed to face at that point to keep his momentum going. So, and they did all sorts of goofy stuff, like Kane abducting Bryan's wife and all that goofy nonsense. But nonetheless, hopefully we get some... my pick is Randy Orton to be Kofi's next challenger. There's already a built-in story there with the thing back in like 2009, the stupid stuff where Kofi was seemingly being pushed more heavily, and they did the thing with him destroying Randy Orton's car, and then one fateful night, Kofi messed up a spot. I think it was that he was supposed to stay down for the punt kick, but instead he got back to his feet, and Orton hit him with the most vicious RKO you'll ever see and proceeded to yell "stupid, stupid" at him. So there's a story there that the hardcore fans will be able to grasp, but they just need anything but Dolph Ziggler. If Dolph Ziggler gets a third match for this title, then I don't know what to say. After this, we get a backstage segment where someone tries to interview Drew McIntyre, who's clearly upset after being such a geek and losing to Roman Reigns, even though he had everything in his favor. And Shane informs us that on Monday, tomorrow, there will be a 2-on-1 handicap match with he and Drew McIntyre against Roman Reigns. So this will continue. And until Roman beats Shane McMahon in a 1-on-1 match, I think it will continue until then. But, oh joy, this match. I'm sure I'm sure Raw will be an exceptional show with that probably being the main event. And that will continue the streak of Roman Reigns not missing any Raw shows since the wild card rule was introduced. Roman was drafted to SmackDown. They started the wild card rule. He has missed one Raw since then, and that's been around 2 months now. And this will keep that streak going. So more Roman for everyone. It's more Roman than ever. The main events of Baron Corbin and Seth Rollins for the WWE Universal Championship. This match and this pay-per-view, in a large sense, was built around who will Baron Corbin choose to be the guest referee. That was the stipulation, I guess, that Baron Corbin gets to choose his own special guest referee. So Seth Rollins enters. He has the steel chair in hand. And Corbin tries to introduce the referee, but Seth chases him off with a chair and says, whoever comes down here will have the same fate as everyone else. And at this point, you kind of knew where it was going. And on our Thursday show where we did the predictions, I predicted it would be Charlotte returning and being the special guest referee. And my theory behind that was you make it a woman so that it's someone that Seth won't hit with a chair. And they did that. It just wasn't that woman. It was Lacey Evans. And I should have known. I should have put the threads together that, Lacey would lose to Becky earlier in the night. Seth Rollins being in the match defending his title, she would be the referee and try to screw Becky's boyfriend out of being a champion. Should have knew it prior to the show. So Lacey comes down in her referee gear. She tries to retract Rollins' chair, but Corbin ends up blindsiding him, hits him with the chair a few times, and then the match starts. The crowd immediately chants, "This is stupid," AEW, Daniel Bryan, boring. They were not fans of this. And there is a defense to this because, Baron Corbin's the heel. Like, what did you expect to happen? I get that it wasn't exactly a thrilling choice, but what exactly did you expect? So, yeah, I don't know. But if I were Rollins at this point, I would just grab a chair and beat the hell out of Corbin with it. Because, there's this thing, it's called the Champion's Advantage, where Corbin has to pin or submit Seth Rollins in order to gain the Universal Championship. So you put Lacey in the position of, if you disqualify Seth, he still keeps the title, or you don't disqualify him and just let the match keep going. So that's what I would have done at this point. But let's see. Rollins powerbombs Corbin through a table. Lacey slowly counts to 10 before informing Mike Rome, the ring announcer, that this match will now be contested under no countouts. Corbin gets a near fall with Lacey counting normally after he does a choke slam on the apron and then a choke slam in the ring. For some reason, Lacey wants Corbin to win, and she's the referee. So I don't know why she didn't count faster or just tell the bell keeper that it was a 3 count. There's just so many loopholes to the the special guest referee thing. And they try to do something here where Corbin is going to get a submission on Rollins, and Lacey will just call for the bell as soon as Rollins is put in the submission. But Corbin was unable to turn Rollins over into the submission, so he gets out of it. Corbin hits Rollins with a chair, and then Lacey makes this a no disqualification match as well. And you see, that is what it was at that moment that we all knew she fucked up. Because we all know where that is going to go. So later on, Lacey slaps Rollins twice. She feeds him into Corbin. Lacey hits Rollins with a low blow. Corbin hits an end of days. And finally, in comes Becky Lynch. I don't know what the hell took her so long. I would have just came out here right away. But nonetheless, I guess it was the nut shot that finally upset Becky enough to come down to the ring. So Becky comes down, she beats down Lacey, and eventually the other referees come and separate Becky and Lacey. And John Cone, the same referee who got the 3 count against Baron Corbin, where Baron Corbin blamed him for his own stupid loss, he would come in and Baron Corbin would tell him, "You better do it right this time." But unfortunately, it was Corbin that would not do things right, as Rollins would end up hitting a stomp on Corbin for the win, and Becky and Seth would celebrate as this show goes off the air. I can't be the only one thinking it, that I'm starting to think that Becky and Seth's whole relationship is a work at this point. I mean, I doubt it is, and I'm half joking when I say that, but like I half expected Becky to turn on Seth, lay him out, and then out comes Brock Lesnar. And then Becky Lynch would be the first Heyman girl. I don't think it would be the worst thing for a Lynch heel turn at some point, just because not yet, not right now, because she's still very over. She's still one of the more over faces in the company, but would it be like what originally got her over was turning heel? So, what originally got her over as a face was turning her heel. As much sense as that makes. But at some point, I think that'll be the move to go with, just because it's starting to die down. She's starting to be a lot more lackluster, but not there yet. So we'll see if they end up doing that at some point. I'm sure Becky will turn back, like the man character and all that. Like, especially if she turns on Rollins to turn heel, because that would just be something that I think would actually make people hate her. But nonetheless, I can't give this show anything else but a thumbs up. The first 6 out of 9 matches, I think it was, were excellent. The final 3, I thought this drove off a cliff. I guess the main event wasn't that bad, but it just wasn't a pay-per-view main event match to me. And I guess that's what I should have expected. It's really what I did expect, but I expected this whole pay-per-view to just be a waste of time, and they managed to at least make it worth our time to watch this show. Whether it was needed or not, whether it could have been done without and we could have just moved on, but this was not a bad show. It was a very good show, I would say, just because of the pure in-ring ability of everyone on this card. And for that, I congratulate them. And we'll see how Fyter Fest does on the 29th, this Saturday. Off the back of this pay-per-view, we'll see how they do. The AEW show, I'll be sure to do an extra review for that. We'll try to do Raw and SmackDown reviews for this week. If you enjoyed what you heard today, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, a comment. Check out the full podcast available on Spreaker, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, all those podcast places. And until then, wow, Chris isn't here to do the sign-off. Normally, Chris would say, "We will wrestle you later." And why that ended up being our thing, I don't know. Chris just said it one day, and we stuck with it, because I found it funny. It's probably more cringy than funny, but there's a cringy funny sort of thing about it, you know? Sometimes things can be cringy and funny. They're funny because they're cringy. But nonetheless, until next time, thank you guys.